Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Solid Waste Management Authority meeting for this month. I'll call the meeting to order, and would you please take roll?
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Here.
Commissioner Hawley?
Here.
Chairman Ania?
Here. Thank you. Our first order of business is public comment. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter that's on or off the agenda. And after receiving recognition from the chair, please give your name and your address, city or county, for the records. And comments are limited to 3 minutes. Are there any public comment? Yes.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Henry, county resident. I have some prepared remarks, which I'll probably do later with when you come to the item. But, and they were in response to the newspaper article that was in the triplicate today. And I have to say, as someone who's been in elected office, I'm tremendously disturbed that what you have presented, dropped off today to people coming in for a meeting, is a completed proposal and practically accepted. There was a meeting in August. Evidently, this started on August 15th. What happened that you didn't have this on the August agenda? I mean, these meetings and items discussed are supposed to be discussed in public, and there may be Brown Act violations. If 3 of you discussed and put this together, that's really serious. Part of my remarks today were to ask you to make this a public process, to make it competitive if you are going to go ahead. Let people see what you're going to do with an RFP that you put together and put it out to, the public, to people that you think might apply, have them apply, and then review those and review them in public and do the hiring in public. We're the ones that have come meeting after meeting to let you know what we think, and I think the public input is very important, but yet I can see it's been totally ignored. Somebody went ahead, and maybe it's you, Mr. Sullivan, and you, Mr. Ania, and just prepared something without notifying the public. In fact, even in the newspaper article, you didn't say anything. Why wasn't this with the agenda? This wasn't online with the agenda. This is just terribly unfair, and I think it's improper for a public body to act in this manner. So, and I've got a lot of other points I'd like to discuss with you later, but this is really, really very inappropriate, I believe.
Thank you very much. We'll answer those questions when we get to that item. Any other public comment? Seeing none, then I'll close public comment, and we'll move on to the next item, and that is a report from the Solid Waste Task Force. Mr. Dunn?
Good afternoon. At our last meeting held regularly, we discussed the ordinances, which we've discussed for about a year now, I think, and we've presented several reports to you on the ongoing of that. One of the things we tried to do was to get Dave Mason and Eric Taylor's input on it. That stalled out. It kind of cost us about 7 months and didn't appear that it was going to ever happen, so we wanted to go past that. At the meeting, we discussed how to go past that and what we wanted to do. One of the things that we decided on as the task force was to determine if we had the details to present to you for the recommendation. That came up when we discussed that. And as a group, we decided that Mary Wilson was the one who had sort of gone into it and presented that before, and there are many details available, and she did between her and some other members, they did some rather good presentations in the past. Now it's been quite a few months, but what we've done and approved is to have at our next task force meeting to have Mary Wilson, and she's tentatively agreed to do that presentation, and if we as a task force agree that that's what we want to present to you as a recommendation, then we would approve that at that point. So that's on for the next meeting.
Thank you.
And there was a few other things, but that's the main one, so that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Appreciate that. Item number 2 is the consent agenda, and 2.1 is to approve minutes of the regular session of Tuesday, August 27th. Is there a motion for approval?
I move to approve the minutes of August 27, 2013.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 3 is the Directors and Treasurers Reports. Mr. Ward?
Sure. Once again, we have a written report in item 3.1 of the summary of our activities during last month since our last regular meeting. I discussed a variety of compliance issues regarding the Crescent City landfill with the county engineer Jim Barnes, and replaced the gas vent parts that were previously damaged, and did quarterly gas monitoring. Part of my rationale for doing that is, of course, it is a county-owned landfill, and while we do administer the facility, much of that administration ends up being a navigation to try to control costs and make sure that we're monitoring as effectively as possible. And so it's just helpful to have a conversation. So I discussed a number of issues with him on that day. Last Saturday, we had our annual household hazardous waste collection event. I'll be discussing that later, but bottom line, we had 180 cars, and even though it was raining, it would continue to be a successful event, ran very smoothly. There is a coastal cleanup that was also that same weekend, and we did waive fees on the disposal, as we usually do. There's a river cleanup coming up this Saturday, organized by the Smith River Alliance, and we're also helping support that by waiving the disposal fees. I did purge and resample well SM6 for toluene. As I reported last time, we did have a detection there, and we don't have the results from that yet. On the 19th, 2 days before our household hazardous waste event, because it's been a busy time, we did go out there with fish well drilling, as well as bush and geotechnical, to try to drill those 2 investigation wells we had discussed at various times, to try to get a better handle on how the water is moving between the landfill and the houses. And unfortunately, the sandy soils were such, and their drilling rig was top-heavy enough that they were not willing to risk driving across the sand to get to the point where we needed those wells drilled. So I have followed up and had conversations with Gina Morrison of the Regional Water Quality Control Board about what we might be able to do, as they do have another drill rig that might be able to access the area, but it's a geoprobe and it can't drill as deep. And basically, it looks like she is not willing to accept that we just have 1 shallow well. She will need 2 deep wells in order to do what we need to do, and so we may be looking at a different drilling company. So that's current status on that, but more investigation to be done. Personnel and staffing, I'm still in the process of reviewing the job description for the refuse site attendant. I believe today is the last day to receive applications for that position, but we did go out for that position with the old job description. Just letting you know that that job description does need to be updated. And I continue to be somewhat challenged to find the time to attend to many of the personnel issues, because it does take a good deal of training and focus on those, and that's one of those things that's just sliding a little bit. We can slide for a little bit, but come into months 4 or 5 of sliding, then there will start being repercussions. So I'm just letting you know. Finances and audits, on item 7.5, we'll discuss a process by which we will propose to consider writing off bad debts, but we want to go through a process to make sure we've done as much as we can on collections on those, but we'll be discussing that later this meeting. And I am still delayed on producing the final grant reports for the Department of Conservation and CalRecycle's oil payment program, again, just because there's a lot going on, and it's one of those things that has been requested both by those agencies and by Norm Newell of Smith & Newell as part of our audit. So it's on the list. I'm trying to get to it, just haven't done it yet. Similarly, our staff training with regards to FEMA requirements and the ethics trainings requirements have also been temporarily delayed. And probably it's a good point to remind that under the ethics policies, I believe commissioners are also required to undergo that ethics training annually. So you might want to look into that. Detective Barber continues the investigation through the County Sheriff's Office on the unaccounted funds, and we have no new information on that investigation at this time. Tomorrow, Spencer Fine from CalRecycle will be coming to inspect a number of our recovery programs that we have, including the transfer station, closed landfill, and a variety of other programs. And I'll be working with Lori Poole on, we'll be going to visit the school district, the casino, and I believe the Gasky and Klamath transfer station sites. I will try to get to the certified oil recycling center inspections. We do have samples to be collected at the stormwater at the transfer station next month. I will continue to try to make progress on drilling those investigation wells. That continues to be a somewhat priority activity, both because it would potentially reduce our permit costs and because it's much easier to drill when the weather is drier than when it gets wet. So we'll have to make progress on that. And then there's also a report that is due to Cal Recycle and our local enforcement agent on our perimeter gas monitoring wells, and that is also an item to be discussed under item 4.3. Finally, some really good news. This arose after the posting of the agenda, but bottom line is Wes White of Hambro Group approached us, and they have some material to move of dirty fines, and worked with Heidi Kunstall of the county, and it looks like we'll be able to take those materials out at the landfill for erosion control and for stockpiling for future repairs. So I think we'll be able to work that out. But one thing that I believe we'll request from this agency, probably signed by the chair, is a letter acknowledging the donation of those materials, the loading and the transport. So if that helps them in any way on their taxes or for any other purposes, we at least acknowledge that that was a generous donation made by them. So I am also working in that regard. Dirty fines, of course, were sold for many years as a very good enhancement to the soil. And so we expect that vegetation will grow very vigorously off those materials. And so I'm going to try to do some grading out at the landfill at that same time when those materials are being delivered. So I get those materials in place so that when the vegetation grows up, the materials are already where they belong, as opposed to having to scrape that layer off and then redeploy later. So that's the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? No, okay.
Do we have a grader?
Well, actually, that's an excellent question, and we did look at possibly buying a grader at one point, and it just seemed better for the amount that we use it and for cost considerations. I called Ace Hardware at the point that we were considering this, and I said, hey, what do you say you buy this piece of equipment? And I was looking at a track loader, a T190 Bobcat, little track loader, and why don't you buy it and maintain it, and we'll rent it twice a year? And that worked out just fine. So they have the T190 loader, we rent it, it's available for rent for anybody else throughout the year, they maintain it.
Good job.
Any other questions of the board?
Is this the time to go into the finance?
No, we're going to go to the treasurer's next. We have a treasurer's report.
Okay, he's here, but we can,
Okay, we do. We do have it. We do have our reports. That's item number 3.2. Mary, Commissioner Wilson, did you have, this is the finance center.
Oh.
Board members have any comments on the reports?
Well, can we ask?
Yeah, come on up, Mr. Taylor.
To explain the big event that's happened yesterday.
We had something that happened yesterday that he's going to explain to us. Why don't you explain that to him?
At your last meeting, you got a July 31st, the reports come from the county auditor, but it said we had $700,000 in there. Yesterday at 4 o'clock, I got another July 31st report from the auditor's office and said we had $225,000 less. So at 4 o'clock, I went into a little bit of panic to find out what this was because it didn't make sense. Well, make a long story short, there's a requirement with the iBank loan that the county reserve $225,000 to pay off the final year's payment of this loan that's due in 20-some years. So the money was taken out of our account and put in the county's account. I've been in conversation with Norm Newell, the county auditor, the outside auditor, and Clint, the county auditor, and that $225,000 is required to make these last payments, but it's going to go back on our books as an asset because it was trash money. And so it'll go back and it'll be some kind of reserve on our account, maybe something like deposit for iBank loan, something like that. But in the meantime, a few years ago this came up, and we set aside $150,000. So I got a little question on that, but the money stayed with us. This time the money went to the county. We'll get another asset on our books, And then I'm gonna look into this 150,000, see if it's two different requirements, or there's just one and they've I guess, reserved. So that was a big thing that happened.
I think
And
they got that 150 too.
Yeah, well, it was basically taken out of our fund balance. It was just reserved in our fund balance. So they didn't get the money, they just reserved it in our fund balance. And we thought that took care of it. And now it's a different amount, and now they actually want cash set aside, which is, you know, kind of solid waste cash, but if that's the requirement, then that's what we'll have to do.
Mr. Taylor, was there any foreknowledge of this? Did you have any knowledge of this prior to this event happening?
It was a little bit of a shock to me.
Yeah.
It'd been talked about over the years, and it's gone back and forth, and then it was a shock yesterday at 4 o'clock when I finally got the reports.
So this is maybe something we need to tie together with our auditor controller?
Yeah, I've been
something
I've
like
been-
this is happening for the future. Now, what is this, a once-a-year event?
Once a
One
lifetime,
time.
once a loan.
Once one time.
Once a 30-year loan, so.
And
And
so-
it's been going on since the loan, and it was money that I guess should have been set aside, and it wasn't, and Mary found where it was mentioned in the 2011 audit, and at that time it was handled by Clinton. I thought we set aside 150,000, and then all of a sudden, I looked at this yesterday, and as Ted will tell you, I went running down to find out what was going on.
Well, sure, it's $225,000 was
Yes,
taken out?
$225,700. And it's
No
some-
foreknowledge?
What's that?
No knowledge beforehand?
Oh, I've been hearing about
Yeah.
setting this aside for a number of years, but I thought we had had it taken care of with 150,000 set aside, so. I still have a question on, are there two set-asides or just one set-aside? And as you know, I kind of walked into this, volunteered, I guess it's 2 months ago now, and I'm getting to the bottom of a lot of these things, so.
And if they do keep a percentage of money aside, hopefully it's the smaller amount, but basically, for whatever the length of the loan is, if it's 20 years, the interest on that should be coming to us.
Yes.
It really should. I don't know how like I said, I looked in the site lease to see if it was mentioned in there, but it is not mentioned there. It must be in the facility lease, which I don't have a copy of, to
Right.
see what the,
And I think when we get it back on our books as an asset, then that would be the next thing is, well, it's our money, we should get the interest on it, so.
Yes, go ahead.
My concern is about process too, as the two of you have already alluded to. That this board should have been aware of that before it was withdrawn from our account. I'm alarmed by that. We need to make authorization for that before it goes into a separate place.
And like I said, this is kicked around back and forth for years, but it was a little bit of a shock to me, so. But I talked with Clint, and he says we're gonna make an entry and put it back on our books, so.
well, and also I think that, something was done in the future, they should know to notify the board first. Yeah, so I don't know how you go about making that procedure, or writing a letter, or, I don't know.
Well, we can certainly request our treasurer to ask Mr. Clinton if anything's going to happen like that in the future, to notify us in advance,
If that's the process.
so we can talk about it.
I'll tell him that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there any other comments on our financials?
I was curious about what the $2,400 was, 1-year support and maintenance for Creative Info Systems.
Creative Information Systems is the software company that produces our scale management software, which is the software we use for every transaction at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. So it's a very complicated, unique piece of software, and that is the update and support contract. So essentially, it will update the software and allow us, whenever we have issues, to have technical support on demand.
So it's an annual fee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other board questions on this? Is there any public comment on our directors and treasurers report? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve?
I'll second.
Been moved and second for approval of our directors and treasurers reports.
It's information.
Oh, it's all information only, I'm sorry. All right. Thank you for those motions. Let's move on to discussion and action items. Item number 4.1 is discussion and possible action regarding submittal of an application for landfill environmental liability insurance.
This will be short. Thanks to assistance from Rich Taylor and the completion of our water quality and gas monitoring reports at the Crescent City landfill, we've completed the application. I was in conversation with Jan Regan today, and we do not yet have a quote. We still anticipate this will cost somewhere between $3,000 and $7,000 annually, but we don't yet have a quote.
Okay.
Ted, what is the deductible on that?
Well, it's a little complicated in that the deductible is $25,000, and because my understanding from our conversation with the Trindell representative is that because this is a pooled insurance, Trindell will essentially give us a no-interest loan for the first $25,000. So if we have an urgency and we were covered by this insurance, we would have access to money immediately for the purpose of enacting the repairs. However, that would be a zero-interest loan that would have to be paid back. And it would be paid back likely by increased premiums.
Do you think at our next meeting we'll be able to have access to that policy? Will we be prepared?
If we have a quote and we have a contract, we can bring that forward. I would be inclined to discuss that in more detail. The bottom line is that if this were my personal cash, I wouldn't invest this money in insurance. However, it's certainly a policy choice, and it does cover environmental liability, but as we were looking into it, bottom line is that circumstances where we actually believe we would have a payable claim are very rare to virtually non-existent, whereas the amount that we would pay in premiums are a certainty. So.
Except we've had 4 audits in a row that have said you need to get landfill insurance.
And if
That
the
was the
board
auditor.
decides to have this insurance, we'll get this insurance, there's no question.
And so what will it not cover? So basically, sometimes if we had a year where there was a lot of damage, I don't know if it has to be, what was our deductible set at?
I believe it's $25,000. Is not the face value of this policy $10 million? Ted?
Yeah, I think it's $5 million per occurrence and $10 million aggregate. But so certainly in terms of the dollar amount, there's money to cover there. But the question becomes what gets covered and what doesn't. And my understanding from the conversations is that this is an environmental liability policy, and therefore what gets covered is actual property damage or environmental damage that's incurred by an adjacent property owner. So essentially it would be covering the costs for environmental mitigation off of the landfill property as opposed to on the landfill
okay.
property. It's a little confusing though, because we did do additional research to indicate who was paid claims under this policy, because that's really where the rubber hits the road, who actually had a paid claim. And we did find one county that had 2 paid claims that were pretty significant. And they were for repairs, and they were for repairs on the landfill property. And that was confusing to me, because as I looked through the bullet list of the things that were covered, one of the things that was not covered, was specifically excluded, was property damage on the landfill property, and yet the claim was paid. So bottom line is we have some outstanding questions that we'll want to have answered before we can give you a full presentation on both the coverage and the cost.
I have a question and follow-up to this policy. And I'm thinking in terms of a natural disaster. Are we covered if an earthquake breaches our closed landfill? Are we covered if a tsunami, well, I don't see that possibility coming in and doing that, but what happens if the aquifer is poisoned and there's a cleanup process? Isn't this what this policy is supposed to do? So it doesn't come on the county, it comes on this policy?
My understanding in the conversations that we've had is that mostly what it covers is the environmental liability off-site to other property owners, which is not necessarily the majority of the costs. Were there to be, say, a subduction zone earthquake and you have a significant subsidence of the landfill, probably those materials are not going to go onto any residential property because they're very close. And so most of the repair costs would be repair costs of the authority and permit requirement obligations with regards to the agencies. So we would want to make sure that those costs were also covered, because those would probably be the majority of the costs.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Any public comment on this item, 4.1? It'll be coming back to us. 4.2 then is a discussion and possible action regarding change order number 2 to the professional services agreement for the Crescent City Landfill Environmental Services with EBA.
Yeah, this is, it's a little confusing in that we have EBA Engineering doing a variety of services for us, including updating the post-closure maintenance plan, doing some analysis of the landfill gas, and doing what's known as a non-water release corrective action estimate. This is a financial estimate of potential costs that would be facing the authority were there to be something like a major earthquake. Also, we are required to produce a water-related corrective action estimate, which is a separate thing. And usually those two numbers are compared, and the higher of those two ends up being what you have to meet in terms of your financial assurances, which in our case are met by a pledge of revenue from the Delaware County Transfer Station. So bottom line is, here's another cost estimate that has to be produced by an engineer or engineering geologist, and we already have an engineering contractor on board. And so recommendation is to adopt and sign and authorize appropriate signatures on change order 2 so that we can get this work done. And the cost will be $6,600.
Okay. Is there any board discussion?
I did do a bit of research on this, in that we'd received a final post-closure maintenance plan from the EBA, and in regards to Title 27, they'd said that they thought that we were generally compliant with all the post-closure maintenance requirements stipulated in this 27 CCR, which is what this is under. And I did have a chance to meet with Ted and go over that. It looks, though, as if because we're under a corrective action that we need to move ahead with this plan, because I certainly would like to save $6,000 if we could, but it looks as if because of the corrective action, we don't have a choice.
Any other board comments?
Just that it was interesting in the body of the EBA letter, it talks about identifying groundwater extraction and treatment as a technical feasible alternative at a rough cost ranging from $2 to $5 million.
Yeah.
So I think this is probably a better route to see if we can get a consultant that can do something different than that.
I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion, any public discussion on this? Seeing none, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chairman Anea?
Yes, thank you. Item 4.3 is the discussion of possible action regarding communications with Cal Recycle staff and a related report on property perimeter gas monitoring wells at the landfill. Mr. Ward?
Huamua and Brian McNally of the Delaware County Department of Environmental Health are here, and they serve or have served as the local enforcement agents for Cal Recycle. And on their most recent inspections, I've been informed that this has become an area of concern. And essentially, it is a requirement that we produce some additional reports regarding the perimeter gas monitoring wells at the Crescent City landfill. Those are around the property perimeter, and bottom line is the regulations have changed, and so they want some additional information, and we'll provide them that information, but in all honesty, I would not be surprised if after that information they ask us to do something more. But in the meantime, we're in communication.
Okay.
I had a question. So I noticed that it refers to as-built plans. So is that like a set of blueprints? Is that what you're looking for?
Typically, that's what is done, but we don't have as-built drawings for those gas perimeter points. They're actually very simple devices. You put down some clay, put in a slotted pipe, put a little nipple on the top so that you can hook up a gas monitoring device to it. and then you sample the gas. The additional requirements that they're looking at have to do with where is the elevation of that gas probe with regards to the elevation of the waste in the landfill mound, because if those do not have overlap, then it's very unlikely that you'll ever detect landfill gas.
Can you explain that one more time, please?
So the concern about landfill gas originated on the East Coast, because when there are more dense populations, the things that come out of a landfill include cream of landfill soup, sometimes called leachate, and then landfill gas. And the landfill gas consists of methane and some other gases, but the big concern is methane, not only because it's a greenhouse gas, but it's also potentially explosive. And there are circumstances on the East Coast where landfill gas is built up in people's basements, and there have actually been fires and explosions and such. And so that is the concern. And since the Crescent City landfill is an unlined landfill, there's the remote possibility it might be a concern here. But the reality is, of course, that it's sandy soils, there's no baseliner, and once the landfill gas hits those sandy soils, they don't migrate very far. And so honestly, I've never detected landfill gas anywhere in any of these wells, and I don't expect to anytime in the future, because I think the landfill gas is going out through the sand. But there's additional paperwork that Cal Recycle is asking for, and so we'll start with the paperwork and see what else is required.
Okay. Any other board comments?
Just for clarification, then, you're going to do this in-house,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully that will be sufficient.
That's my starting point. Yep.
Thank you.
So then there's no action required in this report, and we'll wait for that.
Just a quick comment on,
Yeah.
and I know this isn't viable in this case, but there are some landfills that sell that methane gas as fuel.
Absolutely.
I think it's up in Portland. It's a big business. I've looked into it. It's just not, we have too much rain here, and of course, it's just not enough of it to make it economically worthwhile, but we have looked into it. If something changes in the science, I'd sure like to know about that. Sell the gas and make some money on it.
Good idea. Any other board comment? Any public comment on this item? There's no action being taken. We're going to get a report next. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 5, which is collections franchise. Do you have anything under that item? No. Item number 6 is transfer station. 6.1 is a discussion and possible action regarding a brief history of hazardous waste collection in Del Norte County and a preliminary report on the hazardous waste collection event of September 21st.
So there are 2 history items on this. This is both current events and history. So we'll start with current events. Our household hazardous waste programs, which are administered by this body on behalf of the entire county, on behalf of the city of Crescent City, on behalf of Del Norte County, all the hazardous waste programs that are implemented come through this body. We have a 5-pronged approach to dealing with hazardous materials. First, at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, we have free recycling or disposal of the most common household hazardous materials, including used motor oil filters, ethylene glycol antifreeze, lead-acid batteries, non-aerosol latex paint, and we also accept televisions, computer monitors, properly contained home-generated sharps, and household batteries. Second, we have a load checking program at the transfer station administered by Hambro Waste Solutions Group to make sure that hazardous materials are not illegally disposed. Third, we have certified used oil collection centers, 3 of them in the county, 1 of them at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. Fourth, the authority has supported extended producer responsibility programs for hazardous products, and this has helped establish one of the most convenient household battery recycling programs in the nation here in Del Norte County. And this year, the statewide EPR program for paints will likely reduce our costs for this year's event, as we did previously have a change order with Clean Harbors, and we will not have any bill at all for handling of paints through this last hazardous waste event, and that's because of this product stewardship program that's been supported by this board, implemented by Paint Care. Businesses may also participate in the collection events by appointment the Friday before the collection event. And so this year, we had 180 vehicles, which was a little down from previous years, but considering that it was raining, that was pretty good. And considering that only 1 other staff person and myself had worked hazardous waste events before, it ran remarkably smoothly. And I'm glad that the message is finally getting out that people do not need to stand in line at 8 o'clock in order to get service. It was a steady flow of cars. We had a few lined up at the beginning, but once again, the people who lined up at the beginning were the ones who waited the longest. The ones who just showed up between 9 and 2 generally just sailed right on through. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any board questions?
No, that's great.
That's a great program. Any public comment on the program? We have it once a year. That's good. 180 vehicles on a rainy day. That's really good. All right, we'll move on from point 6.1. We'll move into item number 7, which is our General Waste Authority Board matters. And the first one, 7.1, is a discussion and possible action regarding the recommendation of Commissioner Sullivan and myself to hire an independent consultant to evaluate the operations and structure of the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority. And I'll begin by saying Commissioner Sullivan and myself were a subcommittee, along with the county administrator, Mr. Serena, and the city manager, Mr. Palazzo, and we interviewed people in regards to this consultant work, and it's the opinion of Commissioner Sullivan and myself that Mr. Riggi be hired, Mr. Riggi and his wife be hired as a consultant for Del Norte Solid Waste. Mr. Riggi is the former city manager of Fortuna, California, one of our neighbors in Humboldt County, and he also helped start Solid Waste Authority of Humboldt. So he's very familiar with solid waste in Humboldt County. His wife was the controller of Humboldt Solid Waste Authority up until a year ago, before she retired. Has vast experience in financial management of the authority in Humboldt County, as does Mr. Riggi in the operations. We set aside as a board tasks that we wanted to have done. And those tasks were in the paper today, most of them. And the board, this is the board as a whole, wanted this after listening to the community about what we want to do and what we'd like to see done. And those tasks were in the paper, but it's to evaluate and make recommendations regarding the cash controls and procedures. Evaluate and make recommendations regarding the authority staffing patterns and needs, including workloads and duplication of jobs. That's if any. It'll tell us whether we need to hire more staff, more employees, or not. Evaluate the day-to-day operations and make recommendations for increasing efficiencies, if they need to be increased. Evaluate and make recommendations regarding the structure of our joint powers authority, including but not limited to privatization of the operations or other modification structure of the authority. And that covers what everyone has been talking about for years. Also, evaluate the executive director position and make recommendations regarding the recruitment and the appointment of an executive director. Now, that hasn't been done in 20 years. So that would update that position. That would recommend that. And also evaluate and make recommendations regarding the rural operations of the Klamath and Gasky communities for solid waste. And so 2 other things is the attend the public meeting is needed to make those presentations to us when done, and complete and deliver a final report with details of various evaluations and the corresponding recommendations for the 6 tasks listed in the report that we just did. And he gave us is not charging by the hour, is charging by the tasks. And the total amount of those tasks are $13,300, and which is a bargain for all the stuff that we want done. It's not by the hour. Some of the other things that were we decided on, Mr. Ward, in my opinion, is doing an excellent job as our acting director, so I don't see a need to hire an interim director, which would save us a lot of money, and go right to the consultant, because we want to have these questions answered, and this is the perfect time to do that, as we don't have a director. And as you could heard Mr. Ward earlier, he's very busy. So this will take less than 60 days. We're saving money by doing it quickly, and we covered almost all the points that we wanted to over the years that people have been asking us. So people were interviewed. There were not a majority of board members that interviewed. It was a subcommittee of 2 board members. Someone asked about the Brown Act violation. We didn't violate the Brown Act. We wouldn't do that. We consulted with our attorney. And just for the record, the Brown Act is suspended in California. The state legislature suspended the Brown Act. However, the Board of Supervisors and the City Council of Crescent City, we follow the Brown Act. And we follow it to a T. So there were no violations of the Brown Act. We're trying to speed this process up, get it done, and put it to rest finally after years. So we feel we have an excellent party to do this consulting right next door in Humboldt County that knows our programs, knows what we do, and will do this and make those evaluations and do it quickly. So with that, is there any board comments? First, yes, Mr. Gitlin.
Chair Nia, just for clarification, are we talking about the hiring of 2 individuals?
Yes.
Or,
They work together as a
They work
team.
together, so it's, I guess my question is, who answers to the Solid Waste Authority? Is it Mr. or Mrs.? Or is it a team thing? I'm a little,
It's a
I'm
team.
asking a question
it's a
because
team.
I'm not quite sure
Well,
who's
during-
liable here.
During the interview, Mr. Riggy was the lead. So
Okay.
he would be answering.
The other question I have, it sounds very intriguing. I want to respond to Ms. Henry. It's the first time I'm hearing any of this. So you guys have done an excellent job. I want to commend you. I had no idea about it. I'm very interested in meeting these folks and finding a little bit more about that. When will that happen?
That will happen if we decide to hire them. They will come up here and they will start, and they'd be happy to meet any of the board members, singularly or as a group.
So the process is, so I'm understanding this, is we're going to decide to hire them and then interview them, or they're going to come up here for a get-to-know, and then we're going to decide what's the protocol?
The protocol, Commissioner Sullivan and I interview them, and this is our recommendation, and they're not here this week, they're on vacation, but we can do it either way. We can have them come up so we can introduce them to the board if you'd like, or we can vote on a contract with them, and when they come up for their first assignment, they'd be willing to, they want to meet the board.
Well, just on a
This is a-
standpoint of just, I don't want to put a name and a face together, I'd like to see them in the flesh.
Okay.
And then I'm very enthusiastic about this recommendation, and then we can ask questions. So if we can kind of put the horse before the cart, if they're on vacation this week, then perhaps we can conduct a special meeting upon their return. And
We
then
can.
we can interview them, and then by the time the next meeting comes along, then we can move this into a positive mode. So
Okay,
I'd be
do that.
interested in talking to them first.
Okay. Other board members?
I just want to say generally that I think this is a great direction. I recommended this when we had the 10-member board, and I recommended it again when we had a 5-member board. We all know we can't spend the time at the transfer station we should. We talked about doing some kind of a desk audit to see what was going on there, because frankly, we just aren't there all the time. And the advantages, especially given the controversy surrounding our organization, I think there's real advantages to getting somebody from outside, an objective party from outside, to come in and take an objective look. Maybe we can put some of these other issues to bed at the end of this, and we can move forward, and that's my hope.
Okay. Any other board comment? Yes.
Again, I had not seen this either, and it looks excellent. I feel that they would have a good perspective, particularly with California state laws, in addition to us being a coastal community. We have different concerns because of our regional water quality board is different here, so I'm sure they're familiar, and they also would have connections already with those that are overseeing our area. So I think you've done a great job, and I would feel comfortable moving ahead at this point myself, as I know you've already interviewed them.
Well, if the board would like to wait, I can call them next week, and we can set up a date for a special meeting, and we can do that. We can do the interview. We can interview them. Is there any public comment at this time on this? Yes.
Rich, the question would be, when we have an interview, is that an interview in the public setting? or
Sure,
in a-
be a public
Okay,
meeting.
so that's
It'll be a
important.
public meeting. Yes.
Elizabeth Henry, County resident. You may not understand about my concern how this took place, but having served on a government board as an elected official, this just wouldn't have flown at all. It doesn't matter if you, just the two of you discuss things. If you discuss things in a serial manner at all, you said the board listened to the committee. you know, that, even that kind of discussion it violates the spirit of the Brown Act. I don't care if it's in place or not. It's been the one thing that has really helped California have open meetings, and it should be abided by even if it's changed. So that's my concern. You know, why wasn't this item on the August agenda if this was sent out the 15th? Why did you keep it from the agenda? And the other, let me ask all my questions. Was the acting director informed this was going on? I called about any attachments because there was nothing online, and there was nothing. And I don't want to speak to your acting director, but maybe one of you could ask whether he was aware of this process or not. If he wasn't, then, you know, what's going on? I agree with you that he's really doing a very good job, and he's a very likable and, you know, presents himself well, and you know, you should be proud to send him anywhere, and he does a great job. But why wasn't he involved in the process? He knows a lot about what's going on and what should be in an RFP. I'd like to ask city and county members, would your boards follow this process? Would you be allowed, without appointing a subcommittee in a public meeting, would you be allowed to take these kinds of actions on a problem, on a situation that the community has been very interested in, very concerned about? I just don't understand. You've been here, you've listened, I've been here. Sometimes there have been 60 people. There would be 60 people here if they knew this was on the agenda and it was presented and it was going to be approved. I just don't understand the hurry and the lack of interest in public input. I mean, to hear a commissioner say, like Mr. Gitlin did, oh, this is the first time I ever heard about it. You know, if you were going to approve it today, is that enough time for any of you to put your stamp of approval on? So, I mean, I don't, you know, I can't stop you from doing whatever you're going to do, but I tell you, it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth, and I think the rest of the public's going to feel the same way. And if you give me some time, since you're, you know, I thought we were just going to talk about the wisdom of doing this. I'm glad to see that there isn't a lot of money being spent, but, you know, you're asking questions that really have very easy answers. I'll just pick out some of them. You want someone to look at the handling of cash at the authority. Well, you just increased Rich Taylor's hours and his payments. I think he's a really good individual. You have an auditor that does annual audits, and you have a county auditor. So you have 3 consultants already in financial matters. Now you're going to hire a 4th one. It just doesn't make sense. You have your own local resources. Privatization. You know, why is that being looked at again? With the forced retirement of the executive director, there's no one to privatize. According to Costa Mesa decision, who are you going to privatize and what are you going to privatize? Hambro and Recology are private companies. I don't see any area there that you're going to can privatize. And updating and modernizing the executive director's job description. I mean, there's a really thorough one that's in your information. I read through it, it's very extensive. I just don't see why that you wouldn't be able to, with the assistance of the acting director, update that. In fact, the board should be very involved in that. You should know what the job duties are of an executive director, and you should influence them, as well as with staffing patterns. Have you talked to any of the current employees, like the transfer station employees, and asked them for their input and ideas about duplication of jobs? I mean, they're the ones that are on the job there. Have they ever been asked and talked to about it? So, you know, I just think there's There are just a lot of questions about it, but I think the main thing is the process. And if two of you, one from the county, one from the city, could answer the question, I mean, would you be able to do this in your own bodies? I think not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City. I'd like to ask a question. One of the problems that I have with the way this is presented is that these task identifications and descriptions are so general that it's hard to have any idea what metrics the consultants are going to be held to. What are they going to be, what constitutes satisfaction of task number one? Where is that spelled out? And it's the same way all the way down through. A very general statement about what the task is, and no way for us to know specifically what the consultants are going to have to provide. So we can't have an opinion about whether this is a worthwhile undertaking or not. I was very pleased with my supervisor's point that he raised about having a chance for the whole board to meet with these folks who have been chosen apparently, or who are about to be chosen. One of the things I would like to find out at some point is what's in the RFP. Another thing is how many people responded to the RFP. And is this a sole source, or have there actually been other interviews? Ms. Charania, I think, has explained it pretty well. But coming into this, we had no clue. Another thing I don't see here, which I would respectfully suggest that the board consider including in the consultant's tasks, is an effort to satisfy the very, very fine suggestion that Commissioner Wilson made several meetings ago about basing your decision on this entity that you're overseeing on a 10-year projection of requirements versus capabilities versus alternatives. Mm-hmm. And I don't see anywhere in here where, for example, just for example, they're going to be studying the current and projected regulatory environment in which solid waste management is going to occur. These folks, according to their resumes, have good qualifications to do that, but I don't see that identified as a task, and perhaps it should be. So I wish you luck with these folks, and I do think 60 days may be rushing to judgment, and I'm a little bit concerned, although I've been reassured by the chair's comment, that this was going to be something like the hospital did when they hired their consultants, and we didn't have much faith in that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Hi, Catherine Murray. I'm a resident of the city. Some of you board members I've known for many years. I've sat on that board, and I know it's a very complex board that you are working with right now. But having known some of you for so long and holding you in very high regard, it's awkward for me to say that I'm really uncomfortable with the process that you initiated for this RFP. I'm hoping that we'll hear why from the chair as to having not, in consulting with the rest of the board and not having it flown publicly. And when we put out an RFP for the city or the county or any other organization, it's posted in the newspaper. Maybe it was, and some of us missed it. So I'm just hoping that I hear that there was more transparency than what appears at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Andrea Wadsworth. You know, the last few meetings I've heard squabbling over 6,000 here to get education for our acting director, and you guys will go spend $13,000 when we have people out here that do the jobs in-house. You guys were secretly about picking whoever you were picking Nobody knows anything, but you're gonna squabble about a $6,000 to get our training for our acting director. This is absolutely ridiculous, and I hope you guys get your numbers straight and you come back to the public. Whether I'm an employee or not, I'm a taxpayer, and I want some answers.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, yes.
You got
Yeah, right.
Eileen Cooper. Something the first speaker said really resonated with me, is that you have very dedicated employees with knowledge, working knowledge on the ground, and I think your first step should be to do an in-house evaluation. They know the nuts and bolts, and asking your workers and your manager to come together in a collaborative process for improvement is the best and most economical action you could take in behalf of making, in any business. That's the best place to start, asking the people on the ground and doing an in-house evaluation before you start going out there with magic answers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, this is was a discussion item. It was a discussion and possible action item, and so it's staying as discussion. We will contact the two people and have them come to a special meeting maybe next week or the week after. Mr. Goodland?
I'd like to respond to some of our speakers who have eloquently come up here and presented their case. And Mr. Lonsdale, you and I have had long discussions about solid waste in your home. I don't want you or Ms. Henry or any of the other people to think that this board is some monolithic entity. We all think alike. Obviously, you know my position. I'd like to call the question on whether we can save money and go private without sacrificing service. You and I have had that discussion in your home, and you have a different opinion than I. But I must tell you that I think what's going on here at this meeting is very healthy. And no one's hiding anything from anyone, Ms. Henry, and I want to address that because I'm not privy to what a 2x2 committee meets until they make it at this particular venue, which is our solid waste meeting. So I'm pleased with what's going on here. Nobody's hired anybody yet. We're going to talk to them, and they're going to talk to them in an open meeting where you, all of you who are here today, have a voice. And I think that's a very healthy process, so I'm very pleased with what's taken place here today. There is no set agenda here, and I want to make it clear that our minds are open. The field of solid waste is a very narrow field of expertise. There's not a lot of people that are out there who have the kind of expertise that can help us. I appreciate the fact that we have good people in our county, but they're not experts in solid waste and how to get the job done efficiently, less expensively, and at the same time not sacrifice any quality of service. So I want to commend our board and the Commissioners Sullivan and Ania for, Chair Ania, for going out and opening this process up to the public. I'm very interested in meeting this couple and to hear what expertise they have. I obviously can't vote on someone I don't know, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions with regard to what it is that you're going to do and what's your expertise. So I hope the people here in this room are going to be here at that special meeting that we will plan so that you can weigh in your comments. So having said that, I want to commend the board for its action.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
Well, I do have a question. Where did you find the executive director job description? There is no executive director job. Read the top. It's a manager position. There is no job description. Well, that's the title, executive director. I would encourage you to research it next time before you get up and converse about it. Because it entails what, I mean, one of the main things we found is finances are a key part of that position. And that's something that wasn't done correctly in the past. That's why we're at this point. I'm more disturbed about $29,000 missing. That bothers me. That's a lot of money. That's more than $13,000. And nothing was done at that point to deal with this thing. This came to a head, this went over for years. So I guess my point on that, not to get into a huge dialogue, is yes, the employees are going to have input in the process. That's why you hire a consultant, for them to interview the employees. It's actually written down as one of the things that they are going to do. And yeah, I would agree with Mr. Lonsdale. I absolutely want public input in the process. I have no problem actually if we want to float the RFP for a little bit longer and have a couple other candidates in there. We did interview a few different people. These guys were the most economical. They had really good credentials in terms of doing it. But let's not live in a fantasy land that everything was great in the past, because it was not. There were all kinds of problems. We had 3 or 4 audits in a row showing a net deficit. And I've been through this before. I'm repeating myself again and again, but it doesn't sink in, because we go back and say, and I believe, Ms. Henry, you're one of the people actually say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It was broke. And that's why we're at this state where we're at right now. So let's not be confused about that. No. Public comment's over with. You had your shot, and I'm responding to your questions. So,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So the questions, we'll have a special meeting. It'll be coming up in the next 2 weeks, as soon as we can get a hold of the consultants and to do that. So we're going to move on now to item 7, point to the potential consultants. And we may not like them, and we may move on to get more. So we will see what happens with that. So we'll do that interview publicly. 7.2 is a discussion and possible action regarding the Authority Resolution 2013-03, modifying bylaws, office location, and meeting dates. And actually, this was about meeting dates. We've had a request to go back to our original date. These dates were set by the 10-member board because they had it right after Board of Supervisors meeting. So would you tell us again, Mr. Ward, what was our dates before that? They were a Wednesday. weren't they?
Yeah, if this resolution is adopted as currently drafted, the meeting date, the regular authority meeting date would change to become the second Wednesday of each month at 3:15. And per discussion with Chair Ania, I was asked to draft a resolution that simply reverted back to what it was before the 10-member board was formed. So that's what's in here. The only other thing that this resolution does is it officially changes the address of the authority in the bylaws.
Yeah. Is there any board comments about this, going back to the second Wednesday? That's our resolution.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
Can I ask a question about that? Has the clerk of the Board of Supervisors who keeps the calendar for this room been notified of that change and asked if that date and time is okay with it?
That's a really excellent question, and I neglected to do that. So if you could possibly make a phone call while we're continuing the discussion, that would be very helpful.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Well, while the discussion continues, I don't have any trouble with this in the future, but I do already have an obligation for that first meeting in October. I wouldn't be here for that meeting if we change it immediately.
We'd have to use an alternate then, or, okay.
Chair Ania?
Yes.
I'd just like to get a poll of our current commissioners. Does anybody have a problem with the current model of the last last Tuesday of the month at 3:30? So it's Commissioner
Yeah, I
Sullivan.
mean, we've also had a rollover where board meetings have bumped into the solid waste meeting, so that would be the other reason. We did it originally to accommodate both boards, that it was, at that time it worked, and I had requested Chair Nia to put it on the agenda to discuss moving back to what the original meeting dates were.
I actually would really like Wednesday because it'll give us more time to review our packet. At this point, we get it very late on a Friday, and because business hours are closed on Saturday and Sunday, we have very limited amount of time to do further research prior to coming into this meeting. And having it during a Wednesday, we'll have business days in order to conduct our research prior to the meeting, so I think that is a lot wiser.
And I can tell you, if the meeting's changed to Wednesday, I would still try to continue to distribute the agendas on the Friday before, as opposed to waiting till the Monday.
Thank you.
Yes, I do. I was just looking at my calendar as I spoke. You know, we have to do some prioritization, and I'll work that out. If our present board is interested in moving toward the second Wednesday, is it, my understanding? I would be in support of that, so
Thank you.
we'll work it out.
Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Do you need a vote on this, Mr. Ward, or we do need a vote?
Yes.
I'll move to approve.
Been moved-
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. That's a resolution, we have to pull the vote. Thank you.
And does that include the change of address on that?
Yes, it does.
Aye.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, so that'll be the second Wednesday
Second Wednesday.
of the month. And actually, that'll be in 2 weeks.
Yep.
So maybe we can schedule that, the hearing then.
Probably
Or
won't
have
need
it.
a special meeting.
Probably won't need a special meeting, okay. That's October, what's the date? It's all right, it's about the 8th or 9th, I'll find it. Okay,
I don't
let's
have it
move on to 7.3, which is discussion and possible action of the Waste Management Sector Implementation Plan of September of 13, developed by the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, CalRecycle, and the California Air Resources Board.
When I came across this bit of information, I thought it was useful for the board's perusal for a couple reasons. First, it gives us an indication of what's ahead. The implementation of AB 32 is pretty comprehensive and pretty multifaceted, and it's what has triggered a bunch of the additional requirements that we've had, and including the 75% recycling programs, as well as some of the gas projects we have at the landfill. And they're only just getting started. So this is a list of all of the things the Air Resources Board has worked out with CalRecycle as what they consider to be priority activities during the short and medium term. And so it's part of a more comprehensive answer to the question of why should we continue to consider membership with the Regional Council of Rural Counties Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority. And the short answer is that regulation of our facilities and programs is a changing thing that changes year to year and legislative cycle to legislative cycle. And so a phrase that's commonly said with regards to lobbying and legislation, if you're not at the table, frequently you might have to watch out because you might be on the menu. And so essentially these programs are to be implemented, and the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority is one of the ways that we can engage in interacting with those draft regulations before they become requirements that we have to comply with locally.
Okay. This was a discussion item. Is there any
So
board?
there's no action taken on that?
No. Is there any board comments?
You know, I actually talked to a couple people that were involved in the Environmental Joint Powers Authority and called down to RCRC, and the recommendation would say, their recommendation was to alternate years, like 1 year pay the dues and then skip a year, and that way you'd spread the cost out. But it is important that we don't get hit with things that just aren't applicable in Delaware County as much as they are in LA or more metropolitan areas. So I would be in favor of keeping the membership going, but going to it every other year at that point, so.
Okay. Any other board comments?
And we are on 7.4 or 7.3?
We're at 7.3.
Okay. That's all I have to say on 7.3. And
Okay,
it
so
was
we're on 7.4.
context for 7.4.
Okay, let's go to 7.4 then. That's a discussion. And did you want to speak on 7.3? Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up. 7.3 is the Waste Management Sector Implementation Plan.
Yeah, we did.
We're-
I
that's
think
gonna-
that's the one we're on now, on this.
Did you have, Mr. Long, did you have a comment on 7.3? Yes, yes. Come on up. And then we'll go to the next one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. That, as I read through that, it is one of these things like the work plan that you all reviewed at your last meeting. It is a template of potential activities and requirements that may or may not apply to Del Norte County and to this particular waste management district, as Commissioner Sullivan pointed out. But I think one task might be, as you look forward to Commissioner Wilson's 10-year projection, which is, I think, very important for the board to do, is which of those line items has an impact on Del Norte County and requires Del Norte County to do something, either now or in the future. And there is an ideal task for your consultants, as a matter of fact. But right now, looking at it, you can't tell which one applies to us. And I think that that next step needs to be taken by somebody to say, okay, this applies to us, therefore we must plan either to lay it on the county or the city or continue to have a district to handle it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to rely heavily on Mr. Ward. Is there any other public comment on 7.3? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to 7.4, and that's the discussion that Mr. Sullivan had here, possible action regarding payment of our annual membership dues to the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority of the Regional Council of Rural Counties for fiscal year 2013 and 2014 in the amount of $6,000. That's a lot to say, and they don't have abbreviations. So, is there any, go ahead, Mr. Ward, did you want to?
Recommend approval. They've provided a much more comprehensive explanation as to the kinds of services that they provided for the Solid Waste Authority in the past. They do focus on AB 341, which is summarized in the spreadsheet we covered on the previous item. Organics, which will continue to be a focus and will actually continue to be an issue for us here in Del Norte County, as Hambro is changing the way they're handling organics, and well, it will continue to be an opportunity where we will want to look at local options. And extended producer responsibility. The most dramatic expansion of recycling programs we've had here in Del Norte County during the last 5 to 10 years have been associated with extended producer responsibility programs, including those for batteries, carpet, our efforts at home generated sharps, which have established our current collection programs, and hopefully soon paint, but already that I believe will have saved us cost on our most recent household hazardous waste collection event. So bottom line is, while it does seem like a large amount for a membership, part of what we're getting is this is essentially our main body by which we're able to engage in legislative processes, whether that's the development of regulations or the lobbying on specific bills. And the only time to engage constructively with those is when they're being formed. So it's a little challenging in that way to say, what good is this body? Because what the answer to that question entails is what's on the legislative calendar for this year, because that's really where the engagement happens.
I'll move to approve.
Is there any board comments? Mr.
Yeah,
Hawley?
I just have a question about one of the, no, I'm not second. Do you want to see if there's a second?
Yeah, I'd like to see if it's going to be.
Go ahead
Okay,
with your
I'll wait.
Okay, well.
Very good. I'm sure we'll come back to it.
Oh, good, thanks.
Page 8 of the, one of the letters from the Environmental Council or Residential Council. It speaks to the assistant, there's kind of a disconnect in the paragraph. I don't want to see exactly what it's saying. It says assistance provided specifically to the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority within the last year included. Then it talks about providing free hazardous waste training. And I understood that we didn't take advantage of that over the last year, and yet they say we did.
Well, I think last year, it depends which, I have to look exactly the dates, but certainly in years past, we've had at least 2 or 3 occasions where Larry Sweetser, who is under the employee of the ESJPA, has come up and given us specific hazardous waste training at the Del Norte County Transfer Station. So it's been a good training both for the Hambro Waste Solutions crew as well as us. And really a much higher level of training, a much more specific level of training than what you would get in the typical HAZWOPER training. So generally, when you're dealing with hazardous materials, you have a 40-hour training you have to go through, and then annually you have an 8-hour refresher. Those are typically given through folks who do training all the time, generally firemen down in Humboldt County, and I've gone to these trainings before, and they're all about health and safety. But honestly, what is needed for hazardous waste management and hazardous waste response for a fireman is very different from what's required on operating a hazardous waste facility day by day.
Okay.
So it's a much more valuable training.
Well, my confusion is it appears in the top sentence, it talks about what was provided in the last year. In the bottom bullets, it seems to say, this is what we will provide. And I couldn't tell which was which. But one question I'd have of you, Ted, I like the idea of doing every other year. But I'm now starting to think it might be better to keep this in place during this interim period if you receive assistance from this particular group, because I know you're out there, and given the way things are going, it could be a while before we get an executive director. So if this could be of assistance to you going forward in the next few months, then that's an issue. Do you agree with that statement?
I do, and I believe that essentially the ESJPA is going to be our best tool to keep this body informed about what's happening in the legislature with regards to laws that might impact this body in future.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board comments? Mr. O'Gibbon.
I have a question. And again, I heard Commissioner Sullivan state that he'd like it 1 year on and 1 year off. Is that part of the motion, Mike? Is that?
Well, I think
this is 1 year on and next year it would be.
Yeah, we would revote on it again next year, I assume, is the technical process.
Yeah, I wanted to get clarification. I'm a bit troubled by this cost, and at the same time, this is an authority which is in flux right now. We're looking to hire a consultant at considerable cost, and I'm thinking maybe that this decision to spend $6,000 could be delayed. I can't support it at its present time because I think we're in this position of flux, and I'd like to revisit it at a later time after we hire the consultant to get some input there.
I also would like to say that what would be nice is when we do have a new director, that they wouldn't be stepping into a job already. What I would hope is that they would be able to come in and take a look at things and create their own. So what happens is that when we commit to this, then that's something that needs to be taken advantage of. When we are going through this, it's kind of like cleaning house. And the way I look at it is that the decision really should go to the next person who is coming in, and that where they would like to possibly be involved in. You know, if there are more, there are certainly other regional agencies, or SWANA, or there are, more than one. And this is a big commitment. We're committing someone to that, and we don't even know when we'll get that person. And if we are, again, originally what I wanted to do was to alternate, at least alternate every other year. And I just feel that it would be a good time this year to take a pass, and when the next person comes in, then they can choose what they feel has been the most advantageous for them, because I don't do that job. I don't know. I know Mr. Hendricks really liked this, so he, so he chose this one, but we don't know the next person. And it's a latitude to give to that person so they can make their own decisions. That's how I would look at it. It's kind of time to kind of clean and let them, don't have them step into something that they have to do, because we've already set it up that way. Let them look at things and then decide what they want to do, and they can rebuild it in the way that works for them. So that's my point on this.
Mr. Ward, when does this membership start? Is it
July. I believe it's fiscal year.
So it runs, it runs through June?
Mm-hmm. August 31st is the due date on the invoice.
Okay, so it was due, and then it'll expire in June 30th? I kind of agree with Commissioner Wilson and Commissioner Gidlin, but, you know, we don't have a director right now. And we probably should let the new director decide that, but that person will probably be only on a few months before this comes up again. So I tend to agree that we need to have this right now. And I was looking at the League of California Cities approves this and CSAC approves it. I think we need this time, and let the director choose, the new director choose what we should have and what we shouldn't have in the future. That's just my thought on that. So there's a motion on the floor.
We still have the motion?
Do you still have the motion?
The motion's there, but there's no second.
Okay, I'd like to second your motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public discussion on this? Okay. Yes, come on up. No.
You have to
No.
use the microphone.
Go ahead.
Hi, Elizabeth Henry, county resident. Because we are a small county and way up in the north, you really need a lobbyist. I see this group as being a lobbyist for you, and if you continue to get more and more isolated up here, you're not going to hear about what's going on and what's important. And actually, what would happen then if you don't belong to this group and aren't active in it, then you all have to pick up the pieces as far as legislative information, go to Sacramento. Your acting director is going to have to do that too. There are things moving all the time. I think it's really, really important to stay in touch with what's going on there. And I know Commissioner Wilson has been concerned about the cost to businesses, and as far as recycling, that's one of the major areas that they've been commenting on and working on. And I think that's really important because they're trying to also in rural counties keep from the 75%. I mean, move that back. I think they may have already done some of that because it's just harder and it's different in a rural county. And I think you're really going to regret not having a group that's there for you all the time that will let you know when you all need to lobby or write letters or do whatever. And you know, so, and when a new director comes, that's fine. It's going to take someone a while to even get used to the job and figure things out. And I agree that the acting director, he can't do everything. And you know, he really needs a hand. And wherever you can get a hand, and these are reputable people, you can see what they've done already. So I don't think you should terminate the membership at this point. And anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board, and it's been moved and seconded. So would you poll the vote, please? It's a money item.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
No.
Commissioner Wilson?
No.
Commissioner Mia?
Yes. So the motion passes 3-2. You know, I was looking at the counties that are in here, all these northern counties. As you know, Siskiyou County Board voted to succeed from California, and yesterday Mono County did, so you might have a smaller group of counties and rural. So I just happened to be looking at those names. Let's move on to 7.5.
Attorney, I have to leave. I have a flight I got to catch.
Okay.
So on to RCRC.
Have a safe trip.
So thank you.
7.5 is discussion and possible action regarding a policy to attempt collection and then write off bad debts from the authority's account. Is that Mr. Taylor or
Yeah,
Mr. Ward?
I'll start with this one, and Rich will chime in as needed. Bottom line is the current staff recommendations in front of you, we're dropping item number 2 because we thought at this point in time we might have a list of bad debts that you might be able to approve and write off. But the bottom line is we came down to 3 that looked like we wanted to maybe go that direction, and then it seemed like the right thing to do, given this policy, is to turn them over to county collections. So that's where we're at in the process. We do not have a list of bad debts to write off at this point. But what we would like and would recommend is that the board essentially adopt a policy so that we can write off bad debts. The basic concept is somebody writes a bad check after a certain amount of time. You've tried collections, you've tried sending them notice, it's a small enough amount, it's a long enough a time. After a while, you need to say, you know, we're never going to collect that money, and we don't need to carry it forward on our books as an ongoing bad debt. So that's the process of writing off a bad debt. But what we would like to do to make sure that we make every effort to collect all funds that are due is the process would be as follows. Customers who have paid using checks with insufficient funds are sent letters weekly in an attempt to collect. If such checks are not paid within 21 days, those are turned over to Delaware County for collections. B, commercial charge accounts that are delinquent over 90 days after receiving a statement may also be turned over to county collections. C, county collections generally attempt collections for 12 to 18 months before presuming that the collection is unlikely. D, as part of the closing of the accounts for the prior fiscal year, the authority's administrative assistant and the authority's treasurer will compile a list of debts owed to the authority, including customer names and the dollar amounts considered bad debts, for which additional partial or final collection is unlikely, and will title that report Bad Debts for the Prior Fiscal Year. This list of bad debts for the prior fiscal year will be reviewed in a meeting with the county auditor, authority director, authority treasurer controller, and the authority administrative assistants. The results of this meeting will be recorded, and for all debts for which all parties agree, those debts can be written off the authority's financial records after board approval. Finally, the final list of bad debts written off for the end of the fiscal year, blank, will be presented to the authority board for approval and included in the reports provided to the authority's external auditor. So all a very formal process by making sure we have everybody sign off and saying, really, these debts we're not going to be able to collect.
I have a question, if I may ask. So if someone writes a bad check and it's insufficient and you get that, do you put their name at the gate so the next time they come with a check, that shouldn't be too long of a list?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then they may pay for it in cash right then for that one and the bad one?
Yes.
Okay, we can take that collection?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and the other question I had is, why the county for collections and why not an outside agency? They take a percentage, but I don't know if it makes sense or not, or what your recommendations are.
It's a good question. For all financial and personnel services, we've been leaning on the county.
That's right.
We haven't really gone outside of that family of services.
That answers my question. Thank you. Did you have a comment?
What? I'll just be very quick. My concern as I go through this, and I've experienced this in other environments too, people aren't paying their bills and they're never held accountable. And I don't know, in the end, do they get something reported to credit agencies, or is there some cause and effect for writing bad checks? I don't know what happens when it gets to the county. What's the next?
Well, yes, there is. As soon as we turned it over to county for collections, they impose, I think, a $25 fee immediately. So as far as the person writing the check, they immediately owe that money plus the $25 fee. And then it sort of escalates from there.
That's what I want to make sure. It keeps escalating.
Yeah, it does.
That's my point.
And that's part of the reason why at a certain point, the collections become unlikely, especially if it's a check, say, for our minimum charge, $7. After 3 months, you've added $25. Now, the amount that you're likely to recover from the check becomes less likely.
What price justice, really?
Well, I'm glad we haven't had one in several months. Mr. Gitlin, you had a comment?
Yes, Ted, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing bad debts and I'm hearing bad checks. Bad debts is someone who might have an account with you.
Yes.
Who has suddenly gone south and doesn't pay anymore. That's
Right.
one issue. Because bad checks is the other issue, and there we have existing law, excuse me, which is called the treble damages law, and maybe we could, this board can have that flyer printed and put on the window that if your check is not honored, you are subject to California state law. I don't know what the number is. Treble damages, someone writes a check, bounces for $100, we can, as an entity, collect $300. It's a court process, it's a small claim matter, and the very matter of posting that might be telling to someone who is writing bad checks. Now, I guess my question to you is, number one, do we have a bad check problem, and do we have a bad debt problem? Is this really anything to be concerned with, or are the numbers minuscule?
Yeah, it's several answers to that. First of all, do we have a bad check problem? Not currently. We haven't, last time I checked, we had not received a check with insufficient funds since April. So it's been several months since we've had any checks with insufficient funds. In terms of, do we have a bad check problem? Historically, yes. This $27,000, $29,000 that keeps getting kicked around, it looks to me, and again, from my investigations, it looks like a good portion of that is insufficient funds checks, the amounts on the insufficient funds checks. But that's just first glance, I don't know. But in any case, some of those debts for those insufficient check funds, previously, at some point, they need to be written off. And so we need to have a policy by which we do that. So,
Well, you know, again, I'm not quibbling with you on the overall problem, but, you know, again, we were led down a rabbit hole to believe that $29,000 was as a result of a bad check problem. It turned out that was not the case, that it was really an obfuscatory measure to get us off track, because it was led in an area where, after a forensic audit, it was determined that it was not bad checks that was the problem. So it sounds like we don't have a bad check problem at the current time, and perhaps this board would suggest that you place at the window the bad check law, it's a flyer on it, and let people know that they are subject to treble damages if they don't. Now, getting back to the bad debt problem, if people are on a charge account,
and the answer to that is very few. We have a few debt companies that we're having trouble collecting from, but since we've instituted the policy where we actually charge interest if they're over 60 days past due, folks are doing a better job keeping up with their payments.
You know, we as a board asked for this policy, as I recall, so that's why he's bringing it to us. We asked for it to have the policy if we ever need to use it.
No, I'm understanding that, and I think this is a healthy process, what we're doing. But again, if there's a habitual bad debt problem and it's based on a charge account, of course you suspend services. But at the same time, when someone is applying for credit and does have a charge account, well, maybe it can be backed up with an application with a credit card in back of it. So should the problem manifest itself where you're not paying your bills after 60, 90 days, you can refer to an active credit card, and then we won't be chasing people down for the amounts of money that they owe us. So maybe you'd consider that.
Any other board comments? Any public comment on this check policy? Yes.
Wesley Nunn, county resident. I don't know what the county policy is right now, but is this sort of mirroring? I know this isn't question and answer.
It is. It's mirroring the county policy.
Okay, and so does the county itself eventually do the final write-off of the debt? Is that also mirrored off of the county policy?
You can answer, Mr. Ward. He's our chair of our...
This is a policy where we engage the county auditor plus the authority director plus the treasurer controller plus the authority administrative assistant. So it's kind of unique to this body.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I wondered if it was unique in any way. Thanks.
But we looked for models for collection policies from a variety of sources. We consulted with Norm Newell of Smith & Newell, and we did ask for other copies. So we incorporated the best models we had as we were drafting this up.
Thank you. I guess my only concern is to look at the county policies, what they ultimately do. And like I say, I don't know what the county does, but
thank you.
If there's a reason to be unique. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment on this check problem? Okay, I'll bring it back up to the board. This is a possible action. Is there a motion to approve this? Of writing off the bad checks?
I'll move to approve the process for writing off bad debts owed to the DNSWMA.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved in seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, is it a poll?
Public comment on that?
He
I seconded. Are we going to have public comment?
We did. We
Oh,
did
I'm
have
sorry.
public comment. Thank you, Bill. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes 4-0 with Commissioner Sullivan absent. Item number 7.6 is a discussion regarding the formation, responsibilities, and history of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. Mr. Ward?
Okay, this is the second bit of history. So in discussing in reviewing the agenda with Chair Ania, it seemed prudent to take a moment in each meeting to bring everybody up to speed, to understand what it is the authority does, because somehow that seems to be a topic of confusion. So we have 6 main purposes that are described in our joint powers agreement. The first one is planning, siting, permitting, developing, constructing, maintaining, managing, and providing gate attendants for public disposal sites, transfer stations, and/or sanitary landfills, and planning for and securing the services of necessary non-disposal processing facilities or other options related to recovering discarded resources and processing those materials to increase their value. So bottom line, that makes the authority the designated entity responsible for solid waste facilities in the county. Currently, we have 3 of them. The Gasky Transfer Station on property owned by U.S. Forest Service, the Klamath Transfer Station on property owned by Del Norte County, and the Del Norte County Transfer Station, which is operated on property owned by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority through a somewhat complicated lease agreement through the I-Bank and the county. We also have the the Crescent City landfill, which is a closed facility, and so doesn't get listed here because we don't have operations hours. It's worth noting that in various times in looking at the adequacy of these facilities, folks have commented that we don't have a similar facility in the north end of the county, and illegal dumping continues to be an issue around the areas of Pacific Shores and along Rowdy Creek Road in the north ends of the county. So prior to the formation of the authority, the Del Norte County did explore several potential sites for siting a new landfill in Del Norte County, and the associated studies showed that the development cost for establishing a new landfill would be high, and the politics of trying to site a landfill close to a population center in the county were apparently unattractive. So since 1989, when Del Norte County received a cease and desist order from the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Del Norte County began the planning process to close the county-owned Crescent City landfill. At that time, the landfill was operated by Del Norte Disposal, which is a subsidiary of NorCal Waste Systems, which has since changed its name to Recology, and no money had been collected or set aside for closure-related expenses. The Regional Water Quality Control Board fined the county for a lack of progress on this issue, and Del Norte County paid for closure expenses using a parcel fee, which was later replaced by a temporary sales tax increase. In this context, the city and the county formed the Solid Waste Authority in part to complete closure of the Crescent City landfill and to establish a facility that would serve as a functional replacement and to remove the fiscal liabilities associated with the landfill and closure from the county's accounts. So since its formation in 1992, under the Public Resources Code, the authority has also been responsible for identifying where waste from Del Norte County will be disposed over the next 15 years. That's part of the disposal siting element required under the countywide Integrated Waste Management Plan. The authority is also responsible for updating the non-disposal facilities element of the Integrated Waste Management Plan, describing facilities like Julinder Recycling, which are essential for the continuation of Del Norte's reuse, recycling, and composting programs. And towards this end, the authority has purchased property adjacent to the county transfer station for the development of a resource-based business, and under grants from the Integrated Waste Management Board, now CalRecycle, we developed a cluster analysis business plan and draft design for a reuse center. Transfer station construction was financed under a low-interest loan from the California Infrastructure Development Bank, or I-Bank. And after extended siting, planning, and permitting processes, the Del Norte County Transfer Station opened in March 2005, and the authority's transfer station operations responsibilities were contracted to Hambro WSG. Now, to meet the requirement for 15 years of secured disposal capacity, the authority worked to facilitate a disposal agreement between Hambro WSG and the Dry Creek landfill, to which the authority is a third-party beneficiary. So the transfer station was designed to foster separation for recovery, enabling a relatively high proportion of self-haulers to separate and unload materials for recovery and to reweigh before unloading materials for disposal charged at a higher rate. The public service rates approved by the Authority Board create ongoing financial incentives rewarding reuse, recycling, and composting behaviors while limiting future rate increases to a portion of the change in the Consumer Price Index. Competitive grants from CalRecycle secured by Authority staff have paid for the additional improvements at the Del Norte County Transfer Station, including the permanent household hazardous waste facility, which we used during our most recent collection event, the appliance U-Waste recovery building, and a reuse shed. These buildings are used daily during our annual household hazardous waste collection event. The design of the facility is flexible enough so that expanded recovery activities for carpeting, home-generated sharps, fats, oils, and greases, and soon paints and architectural coatings can be implemented relatively easily. So the public rates charged at authority facilities continue to be the lowest compared to similar facilities in Humboldt, Curry, or Del Norte counties. And as a public facility with a scale, the authority is also poised to provide public scale services at this facility at a future date. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. That's an excellent overview of that. I learn something new every time, every time. Is there any other board comment on this?
Is
Just,
there-
I appreciate the history. It's something I hadn't read.
I was wondering about the Gasky and the Klamath transfer station. Is there any way to get services out there, electricity? Or I noticed before that you don't collect any credit cards because you don't have access, and then also it mentioned something about no electricity.
Right.
So I'm wondering, as far as for the staff that's out there working, number one, it might increase the usage, and two, it would be nice for whoever's working out there to have a heater.
Well, we do provide propane heaters, because you're absolutely right. Staff safety and comfort is important to us all. And we do have porta potty services out there, so there's no running water, there's no sewer, there's no power at either the Gasky or the Klamath facility. And it's an excellent question. To my knowledge, I don't know that we've ever even asked for what it would cost to deliver those services to those facilities. So perhaps that's something the board would like to consider.
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know, have you guys been out to those?
No, I haven't, but you know,
I never have.
in our consulting thing, that they are going to look at that. We can bring that up to them.
And
Looking
the
at that.
board members should realize that part of the reason why it's always a challenge to figure out ways to enhance those facilities is that they always lose money.
Yeah.
Even though we've adjusted the rates as best we can, they continue to lose money.
Yeah,
I
that's
still think
fine.
they're worth having,
Yeah.
because the cost to both the environment and the community to clean up materials that are dumped in the outlying areas is way more than the cost that
Right.
the
It's a
price to keep
convenience
those
for them.
facilities open.
Yeah. We'll discuss, that'll be discussed with the consultant, so that's a good point. Is there any other board comments on the history? All right, we'll move on to item 7.7, which is a discussion and possible action regarding inspections with Spencer Fine of Cal Recycle commencing on the 25th of September.
Just FYI, letting you know, Spencer Fine from Cal Recycles coming to town to look over our shoulder starting tomorrow morning.
I was going to say, that's tomorrow, okay. So he's just going to do a check or,
Yeah, we're starting today looking out at Pelican Bay State Prison. He's going to look at some of our recycling programs.
just to see how it's going?
Yeah, he will visit the Gasky and the Klamath transfer stations while he's here as well.
All right, hope we get a very favorable report.
When you're going, if you can call me, I'll head out there.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Item 7.8, our last item, is a discussion and possible action regarding appointment of a labor negotiator to negotiate an MOU covering mid-management employees.
I had discussed this with Chair Ania earlier. Essentially, once it appeared that we were not going to have an interim director very quickly, then we need to have some party to negotiate a MOU covering mid-management employees, which is not currently approved.
Is there any board comment? I asked him to put it on there because we don't have a director right now, but usually that's the director that's the negotiator.
Ted, do we have any time challenges on this?
Well, there's currently an agreement that it was in process of negotiation, and it's now languishing because there's nobody to negotiate with. So that's the main hurdle.
Is it appropriate that the personnel officer of the county be in that role?
I don't know.
Could Joey Young, is that something that, somebody from the county here, is that something that, I think that's something you must do for the county. And there seems to be a real connection between county personnel activities and those of the employees at the landfill, even though they're not part of the same unit.
Yeah, they tend to mirror one another.
Right.
What's your suggestion, Ted?
Well, this is really just to ratify a simple Me Too agreement, because as I had said earlier, at every point during my employment with this agency, when referring to the personnel policies that were referred to were the ones negotiated between the county union and the county, because we were mirroring the county personnel policies. Now, obviously, we're not directly county employees, And so when it talks about employees of Del Norte County, that agreement doesn't exactly apply to us, and yet it's the agreement that applies to us. So all we're trying to do is get an agreement that actually applies to us, and everybody agrees it applies to us. And we need to have somebody to negotiate, finalize those negotiations. I don't think they'll be very complicated, and I think it will be a very simple process. If the board would like, I think one option, for instance, might be to have that negotiation either happen with one of the commissioners or the legal counsel, and then bring it back to the board for final ratification.
Is one of the items of labor negotiations for this covering joining a new union or leaving a union?
But the two employees that would be covered by this agreement are Isabel Valdez and myself, and we're both currently union members.
So it only has to do with working conditions or salaries?
It's the general labor agreement. It's the MOU that covers all personnel policies, everything from vacation to retirement to sick benefits to family leave. All of that is covered under this employee agreement. And like I said, the one that we've been handed mentions employees of Del Norte County, and we have a similar agreement for the gate employees, but it specifically has mid-management employees in a separate bargaining unit, so it doesn't apply to mid-management employees.
You know, I wouldn't mind our legal counsel looking into that for us.
I think that would be good. There are
Commissioner
those
Sullivan
legal
is not
issues.
here, and it would only be a recommendation of what they do. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel comfortable as a commissioner negotiating,
No, I think we should have an
because we have
expert.
the final say.
Yeah, we should have someone, an individual, who will make a recommendation to us after reviewing all the facts. And I don't know if we can volunteer anyone from the county. I think this is, Martha, do you have
Are
an
you?
opinion on this?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do you feel
As
about it?
to who would be that individual to negotiate and present to our board?
Or yourself? Would you be willing to do it?
I don't have a problem doing it. I was involved in the last negotiation of the MOU for the non-management employees, I guess you'd call them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
With Director Hendrick when he was here. Yeah, I joined in those conversations. You want someone that's familiar with the organization. Again, I don't know if anybody from the county would be interested in doing that. Certainly I would, whoever does it would need to consult with the county on what their current policies are. Because that is what we're trying to do, is make consistency.
Yeah. I don't-
Certainly one of the board members also could fill that role at this time if anybody, I don't know if anybody's interested in doing that, but
I'd be, given that I was the HR director of the school district for the last 20 years, I'd probably be the logical choice to go forward with this, but I don't really want to have primary responsibility for it. I could work with Martha, for example.
Is that okay with you?
that works for me.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I was going through names in the head, and then boom, I stopped on Rick Holly's name. just like that. I said, didn't Rick used to do that with the school board?
We do that on the
School
city
district?"
council a lot.
So I think you are the natural, Commissioner Holly. So I'd like to ask you if you need action to do that.
Well, yes, we should.
I'd like to ask you to sit in that role. No, you're more of a conduit, as I see it, between the two entities, and then report back to the board.
I'd be glad to do that. Could we have the permission also to maybe invite Joey Young or something like that? Because I mean, he has the unique knowledge of the current actual practice.
I would think so. You could pick whoever you wanted to help.
Yeah,
that a motion?
I think that's a decision that should go through Jay Serena and ask
For his use.
if we as a board go to Jay and say we would like to have Personnel Director Joey Young in this process, that would be, in my opinion, the appropriate protocol.
Is that a motion to
Is
approve?
it-
I will make that motion.
Did
I'll
you-
make that motion.
did you have a
I'm
question?
sorry, go ahead, Mary.
Well, again, we've had this before us previously, and we just decided at that time that it wasn't the appropriate time to move ahead. I know I have a letter here from Mr. Hendricks in July of this year, stating that, they were, let's see here, that as director, he was, of course I should get his actual words here, but basically, again, mid-management is not included in the contract that we have at this point in time, and that he was going to start, look into negotiation, and I don't know, I could see where the director would have the most information to move forward, but last time we discussed this, and when it came up as it was temporary, we, at that point in time, said, no, let's wait before we're getting into something here. Let's take our time, and it's, again, Mr. Ward, who's doing a great job, is 19 years has been in this position, and if we can have someone that can look at it, that can weigh everything out, we don't want to bind ourselves to when at this point in time we're looking at everything. I mean, is that something for the new people to look at, or again, it's just it's a narrowing.
This is an interesting point you bring up, Mary, and I'm just thinking the same way as I'm making the motion. Are we jumping the gun? Should we wait for this special meeting, hopefully to appoint a new director, and then let him suggest these things? Is that what I'm hearing you're saying, is to slow the process down and wait? Yeah.
That's what we had decided last time. When this came before us, there was a temporary, it was called temporary, and then when we realized that it wasn't temporary, we went back to what we have currently and looked at the conditional employees, and those again were account 1, 2, and 3, and the gate is covered. And that in looking back at the letters, the first time I saw something come forward to this board this year was from Mr. Hendricks, and that was in July. So I didn't see anything previous. What's that?
Yeah, before that, okay.
Previously, before that. So that really hasn't been that long. It's according to Mr. Hendricks' letter here. I can dig it out if we want to read it.
Ms. Rice had a comment she wanted to make. Yes. Sir.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think the last time this came up was the entire agreement just kind of came before the board at a meeting. You're asked to, did you want to approve it at this date or not? What will happen in this process is you actually have negotiators that will go and talk with mid-management and look through the agreement. They can also talk to county personnel to see what's going on in the county. I think part of the concern before was that, I don't know if there was some negotiations on in the county or something, but whether this was going to affect anything going on there. And that, by just putting that MOU in front of the board, there wasn't a lot of thoughtfulness behind it. And so I think what this process is designed to do is to actually give it that thoughtfulness and, look through it, see what else is going on with the other departments, and make sure that it's consistent. There aren't any issues or red flags. And all of these, as issues come up or as commissioners have questions, this is a valid topic for closed session in which you meet with your labor negotiators and you discuss these issues confidentially. So this can go on as necessary until the board is comfortable with the MOU that's presented to them.
In working on that, is that committing us to the process at this point in time?
The negotiations can last a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there is some commitment, but at this point, to say that you don't have a policy to follow is also not correct.
Yeah, that's what feels bad to me. We don't know who's covered by what, and we were looking at that early on, and that I find that kind of disturbing way to do business. So it's an opportunity to, I think, clarify the roles of the employees, and it's ultimately MOUs have to be ratified by both parties.
It also gives you more control, because I think at this point, without it being clear, you may end up being surprised in the end at what policies will apply.
Mr. Ward, when did you become a union member? When did you start paying the dues?
I think at least 15 years.
Okay,
We have a public comment coming up.
I did not know that. Thank
So,
you.
I didn't-
That's good
Go ahead.
information to have.
I'm Andrea Wadsworth. I am the union president for the Gates, and also we have people that have been hired on as gate staff, half account clerk. Now that this person has been joined with the union, now they've moved up is Isabel Valdez, who has taken the administration position. And as a member, she's paid her dues, and I believe that we should have a side letter for our 2 supervisors. There's a lot of different offices in the county, such as probation and all these other places, and they are all covered under being supervisors. So for us to have a MOU and a side letter to protect Ted, Isabel, and know if they're, where their retirement is, where their insurance come from, we all pay for our vision plan. It's a very great asset for our employees. And for them to be able to reflect back on page so-and-so, I highly recommend this board to move forward with the union contract that we have put in place. It took Martha and Kevin and a few of us employees a long time because we used to run off the county's MOU, and we finally got our own MRU with our, I think we have 4 or 5 employees, just to adopt what we have. It's for 2 employees. We can't have a president, a vice president, a treasurer, a secretary, and we're even talking about joining the county union meetings because we don't have enough bodies out there to protect us. We need help and we need to join together, but we have to have our own MOU, which we already have.
Thank you.
So to adopt it, I would approve that.
Okay. Any other public comment? I'll bring it, yes.
My name is Patricia Black. I live in the city. And as a long-term ex-government employee and union member, it seems to me a little unreasonable to expect people to work without any kind of contract that says this is what's expected, this is what you get. So I would think it would be reasonable to go ahead and just confirm what you're supposedly already working under.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, I'll bring it back up to the board. Is there a motion to go ahead and to appoint Martha Rice and Rick Hawley to, and possibly a county personnel person to begin negotiations to start this process?
We already have a motion.
I
Was there a motion? You did make
actually
it.
made the motion.
So you did, I'm sorry.
I did, and then Mary had some comments,
questions.
so
Is there
I
a
think
second?
we were looking at a second.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, who
Yeah.
seconded it?
Are you going to second?
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Would you pull the vote on this, please?
Yes. Commissioner Hawley,
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
No.
and Chairman Ania.
Yes. So that motion passes. That is all that we have on our agenda today. Our next meeting, we do not have a closed session. Is that correct, Mr. Ward? I don't think we do.
There isn't a closed session on this
The
item.
next meeting will be at our new regular meeting date, the second Wednesday in October at 3:30. And I'm not sure the date of that. It's around the, is it the,
Karen, can you look?
it's the 8th or 9th?
What's the second Wednesday? Okay.
It's
Ninth?
the
Ninth.
9th?
Wait
We'll get,
at 3:15.
okay, it's October 9th at 3:15.
All right.
Chair Nia, are we, and we're very possibly going to have another meeting in the next week and a half or so?
Yeah, probably not. It's only 2 weeks from tomorrow, so we'll
Okay.
probably do it on the 9th.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you for coming. Meeting's adjourned.